Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, a harsh lesson learnt in the worst possible way. From behind bars, Malachi Subecz mother warns other parents. The ACC dilemma that could see a seriously injured mum stuck this side of the ditch. Calls for the Immigration Minister to use his special powers to grant a Kapiti family residency. Situation vacant again. Auckland Transport loses its new CEO before he even gets in the driver's seat. And honouring creepy crawly critters, you know, the biters and the buzzers, the ones we love to hate. We have the contenders for Bug of the Year. Check us out, Sky Channel 83, or you can watch Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. A leading child protection agency is urging the government to institute mandatory reporting of child abuse without delay. The head of Safeguarding Children, Willow Duffy, says she endorses Dame Karen Poltasi's call for mandatory reporting in her report released yesterday into the murder of 5-year-old Malachi Subecz. She says it's not enough to have policies in place.
A child protection policy alone does nothing, and we need to move to mandatory reporting, and we also need to make sure that the centres that have child protection policies are audited to make sure they mean something and they work in practice. We've got to move away from a tick box exercise. It's just not good enough.
Willow Duffy says frontline workers like doctors, nurses and teachers need training in child protection so they know what to do when they have concerns. Women's groups are calling on the organisers of the Rhythm and Vines Music Festival in Gisborne to drop a UK rapper over a domestic violence conviction. Dizzy Rascal received a 12-month restraining order and a curfew this year for assaulting his ex-partner. Women's Refuge Chief Executive Ange Jury says keeping the artist in the lineup sends a poor message.
We claim to care about things like this, but when it comes to our own particular interest, like going to a festival and having a good time, then maybe it's not quite so important.
Ange Jury says advocacy groups will be trying to speak to the Immigration Minister about the rapper's trip to New Zealand. Rhythm and Vine says it respects the justice process and is following immigration rules for artists entering the country. Auckland ratepayers are being told they can't afford not to consider the Mayor's idea to reduce debt. Wayne Brown says selling the council's 18% shareholding in Auckland International Airport could raise nearly $2 billion. He says that would reduce debt servicing costs by at least $88 million a year and cut next year's rates rise by almost a third. Jordan Williams from the Auckland Ratepayers Alliance says it's worth considering.
I think most ratepayers would agree that this hole in Auckland Council's budget requires all options on the table at least to be considered. Unless something is done, Auckland ratepayers are going to face double-figure rate increases over many years to come.
Jordan Williams says ratepayers should consider all options to bring down the council's spending. The Court of Appeal has dismissed Ngāti Awa's appeal to stop a company from taking 1 billion litres of water from an aquifer near Whakatane. Creswell, which is a subsidiary of Chinese soft drink giant Nongfu Spring, had applied to expand its water bottling plant at the Otakiri aquifer. Pōkere Paiwai reports.
Ngāti Awa argued the use and disposal of plastic bottles should have been taken into resource consent consideration. It also said the expanded export and use of bottles produced at the plant would have an adverse effect on the environment. The High Court and now the Court of Appeal have ruled those effects were beyond the scope of the consent process. The Court of Appeal also ordered Ngāti Awa to pay court costs to both Creswell and the Bay of Plenty Regional Council.
A negotiator for Eastern Bay of Plenty, iwi, Whakatohea, says he's confident it has the numbers to finalise its treaty settlement with the Crown. 67% of Whakatohea have voted to accept a $100 million settlement offer, which has been one of the longest running and most contentious. The results will be taken to the government to decide whether it's enough of a mandate to settle. The chair of the Whakatohea Pre-Settlement Claims Trust, Graham Risera, is confident it is. He says he expects to hear from the government by the end of the year. It's 4 minutes past 5. In sport, the future of Super Rugby Pacific has been locked in until at least 2030 as New Zealand Rugby and Rugby Australia settle their differences with a new governance model. A 9-person board of independent directors and representatives from both rugby unions and their respective player associations will oversee the competition. No changes will be made to the 12-team format at this time. New Zealand Rugby Chief Executive Mark Robinson says reaching the new agreement hasn't been without challenges, but he's pleased with the outcome.
One governance body focusing on what's good for the fans, what's good for, entertainment, what preserves safety and player welfare, all at the same table, all having the same conversation. So that's incredibly unique. And out of that, we hope that it will create a huge amount of long-term value.
The new board will also look at an integrated women's competition between Super Rugby Aupiki and Super W in Australia. It's been a rollercoaster ride for the final round of Group E at the Football World Cup in Qatar. Japan and Spain have qualified, but Germany have failed to get past the group stage for the second straight tournament. Having now beaten both Germany and Spain in Qatar, Japan's Ritsudon believes they can go all the way.
I think we deserve it, and it is not a miracle, and we play very good. We have to go top 8, so that's our goal. So we have to give everything for next game.
Japan will play Croatia in the round of 16, while Spain will play Morocco. That's the news.
This Saturday morning, the risks to our native species from bird flu. From ABBA to Kate Bush, Guardian music critic Jude Rogers on why pop songs mean so much to us. And plant lover John Drury on the discovery of a carnivorous underground pitcher plant. Call Susie Ferguson a how. Join me this Saturday morning from 8 here on RNZ National.
RNZ National, funded through New Zealand On Air. Lisa Owen and Checkpoint is next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. For Northland and Auckland, long fine spells with isolated showers. Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty mainly fine with isolated showers for tomorrow. Waikato to Kapiti Coast, including the central high country. Fine spells, a few showers developing this evening, becoming fine tomorrow. Gisborne to Wairarapa and Wellington, a few showers spreading north, then clearing to cloudy periods in the south tonight and elsewhere tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough, showers developing with cloudy periods for tomorrow, showers becoming confined to the ranges. Bulla to Fiordland fine, but some showers in Bulla and Fiordland mainly tomorrow. For Canterbury, scattered showers retreating to Banks Peninsula tomorrow morning and fine spells increasing. Otago and Southland, showers mainly in Southland and coastal Otago today, becoming confined to the southern coast tomorrow, and a few showers for the Chatham Islands. It's coming up to 7 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi marama. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Do not trust anyone with your kids who aren't family. The words of Malachi Subecz mother, who from behind bars says that's a harsh lesson she's learnt in the worst possible way. Malachi's mum trusted Michaela Barrable to care for her boy when she was sent to jail. Barrable tortured and murdered him. Today, some children's advocates say the 5-year-old was not invisible in the months before he was murdered. They say there were not only red flags, there were flashing neon lights. It's just no one in authority took action. But some are warning mandatory reporting of possible abuse could actually put children at greater risk. Ruth Hill reports.
His name means messenger of God, but it seems no one in authority was listening to Malachi's message while he was still alive. It's just over a year since he was tortured to death by his mother's friend, his caregiver, Michaela Barrable. From prison, Malachi's mum says there are no words to describe her emotions in the last year. Her words are revoiced.
Something like this I would not wish upon anyone. I've made my mistakes, all of which I live with every single day. All I hope to come from this is this does not happen to other parents doing a lag who have kids. Do not trust anyone with your kids who aren't family. A harsh lesson I've learned in the worst possible way. I want to thank every single person who genuinely supported me and helped me through the toughest time of my life, especially those who were there.
Dame Karen Putasi's report into the 6 government agencies involved found their failure to share critical information made Malachi invisible within the system. An advocacy group for children in care, Voice Whakarunga Mai, says a report is worth nothing if no one acts on it. Chief Executive Tracy Shipton says Malachi was not an invisible child. The warnings were there.
And I just don't think being sad about it is enough anymore. We need to be mad and we need to be mobilised to do something different as a whole society, not just our government departments.
Malachi's childcare centre documented his injuries but did not report them. One of the recommendations out of the independent report is for mandatory reporting of possible child abuse. Early Childhood Council Chief Executive Simon Lauber says teachers are sometimes scared to report child abuse when they're not certain.
You're putting yourself at risk when you speak out, and you've got to feel safe when you do that. So it's actually not really about the law or compliance. It's about supporting people out there in centres to do what's right.
Associate Professor Emily Cadell from Otago University is a registered social worker. She says mandatory reporting could actually put children at greater risk. Firstly, because it will swamp oranga tamariki with pointless notifications, and secondly, because families will be more likely to hide what's going on for them.
In the low-risk cases that people will be forced to report, that actually damages their relationship with the family and reduces their ability to engage in, therapeutic and educative responses. So there's unintended perverse consequences of these types of blanket rules.
Fellow social work academic Ian Hislop from Auckland University agrees mandatory reporting is not a cure-all.
In New South Wales, where they've got mandatory reporting, they have an unconscionable number of children in care, particularly children of Indigenous Aboriginal backgrounds. So, you need to weigh these things up very carefully. You can't just create new laws and systems based on one tragedy, however horrendous that tragedy is.
Just Speak Executive Director Epiphany Ford-Toa says the concept of mandatory reporting is flawed, especially if the job is going to oranga tamariki.
Institutionally, oranga tamariki has been a failure and they continue to fail tamariki Māori. So having that included as a recommendation in the report is quite surprising and in many ways disappointing.
Epiphany Ford-Toa says at-risk children and their families need wraparound support, not surveillance.
Willow Duffy from the harm prevention charity Safeguarding Children supports mandatory reporting of suspected child abuse, saying right now there's lots of barriers stopping people speaking up.
So there are many reasons, Lisa, and this is a big part of the work and the research that Safeguarding Children have done over the past 11 years. So we've got a great insight. I know why people don't report when they're in positions of trust, when they're working with children, and that can be from things like they're worried about making a mistake, getting it wrong. They're concerned about making it worse for the child. They're worried about losing the relationship with the family. They're worried about breaking the legislation. They're fearful of their own safety. So there are many, many reasons why people don't report abuse.
Have you ever been in a situation where you've felt hesitant to speak up?
Absolutely. I'm the CEO of Safeguarding Children now, but I'm actually a registered nurse, and you can hear from my accent, I'm from the UK, so I worked on the front line with child protection cases as a specialist community nurse, and absolutely I've been in that position. And the thing that made it easier for me was having people around me, and the organisation that I worked for supported me, and it was very clear that there was an expectation to report. So for me, it is the organisational culture and commitment of the organisation and the support around our frontline practitioners regarding support in relation to training and supervision, money invested in their training, making sure that they're cared for. We've got to look after our frontline professionals so we can look after our children.
So how will mandatory reporting take away the barriers that you have just identified?
So one of the dilemmas that people have is the fact that they are unsure whether they are allowed to actually report. So for me, that removes that barrier. So very often people in the research that we've done tell us that they're worried about breaking legislation, they're worried about breaking the Privacy Act, they're worried about getting into trouble with their place of work. And for me, and that's one of the biggest barriers. So for me, if we remove that and make it mandatory to report, but we have to put in mandatory training as well, so those people know how to recognise child abuse and neglect and how to respond effectively.
What kind of evidence is there that mandatory reporting actually works in the sense that it saves lives or removes children from abusive situations?
There's mixed evidence of its effectiveness. It was originally started in America, but America's got a very different child protection system, and then it's been implemented in Australia. And again, they've got a federal system and states. So people who are mandatory reporters say that it actually makes it easier for them. They're more likely to actually report. And I think that New Zealand's in a situation now where we have to give it a go, because we know that people struggle to actually report abuse and neglect. And the case of Malachi is a prime example. They had the policies in place, but they didn't actually follow them. And if we can remove that barrier away, I think we have to. I think we've got to give it a go.
But this could be a policy, another policy that we put in place that people simply do not follow.
It could, Lisa, it could. And if we're not going to have mandatory reporting, I would say that there needs to be an absolute commitment for mandatory training. So, and it's across every level. So we're talking about in training for our doctors, nurses, social workers, in our registration bodies. So part of our registration, like as a registered nurse, I have to re-register every 3 years. I want to see that I've got to show that I've had child protection training. And then also put it in the legislation as well. So the Children's Act is a weak piece of legislation that has a crucial role in protecting our children. So it could actually be bolstered by putting in there that mandatory training, and also make it so that everybody who works with children, any organisation, has to have a child protection policy, not just those organisations that are funded by government, because I want to protect children. I'm not that fussed about protecting the government, and it does make me question why it only applies to government-funded organisations.
And that's Willow Duffy from Safeguarding Children. It is 16 minutes after 5. Let us know your thoughts on that one. She's also calling for mandatory child protection training for anyone working with children. 2101 on text, or email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Kia amo tonu mai, stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. A New Zealand mum back from Australia for an extended Christmas holiday on the West Coast is in limbo after a freak accident at a supermarket car park. Chelsea Ferguson is faced with the choice of saving or amputating her leg after it was crushed between a wall and a car. Adding to her stress, a dilemma with ACC, with no guarantee her rehabilitation will be funded if she returns home. Louise Tanuth reports.
What was supposed to be a 6-week holiday to visit family back home for the festive season took a turn for the worst for Chelsea Ferguson. Less than a day in the country, she was hit by a car at New World in Westport just over 2 weeks ago.
We were just leaving the New World in Westport. 2 of my children were already out in the front walking to the car, and then somehow I managed to get Pippa out the way first, and she pushed as well, Archie out the way when the driver pushed his accelerator instead of the brake and crushed me into the building.
3 of her 4 children were left uninjured. 6-year-old Pippa was left with a concussion, a broken arm and collarbone. She says Pippa wouldn't have survived if she didn't push her out the way, but that left Chelsea with lacerations to her right leg, and her left leg was degloved in the accident with no blood supply for 6 hours. Now in Christchurch Hospital, she's had 5 surgeries on her left leg, but it's deteriorating fast. Today, she's had another major operation to determine whether or not it can be saved.
There's an 80% chance they're going to take my back muscle out and do like a muscle flap around my knee and my leg where all the holes are, and then skin grafts. So they should know within the first week if the muscle has taken and survived.
In the meantime, her mother and husband have flown out along with some extended family members from Australia to be with her children. The hospital is providing them with emergency accommodation, but that's booked with other patients from next week. While her immediate medical costs in hospital are covered, she's been told her rehabilitation could take up to 12 months. She says when it comes to cover from ACC, She's struggling to get answers about what happens when she goes home to Australia.
But the times that I've rung ACC, they've just basically said I have to stay in New Zealand for treatment. And obviously, I'm so thankful for the treatment and everything I am getting. But just the uncertainty of how are we going to survive?
ACC lawyer Peter Sara says rehabilitation must be provided to patients like Chelsea in New Zealand.
It's not a question of her, whether she's in New Zealand or not. It's just a question of where the rehabilitation is provided.
He says if she needs the support of a family member to recover in New Zealand, she might be eligible for some funding. Peter says for many clients, this situation is far too common.
It got to the point where I wrote to the government and said, look, you need to warn people who come here. Loss of pay or long-term rehabilitation is simply not available. When you come here, this is the reality of it, so at least they come here with their eyes open. As far as I know, that has never been done.
ACC says it can't comment on Chelsea's case without a privacy waiver. In a statement, Deputy Chief Executive Andy Milne says support is assessed on a case-by-case basis. Under the Accident Compensation Act, there's no funding for family of an injured person to travel to New Zealand, but they can help with funding for travel and accommodation in some circumstances. Once a person leaves New Zealand, they would be eligible to be assessed for lump sum compensation and may also be entitled to some ongoing personal care. The driver of the vehicle has not been charged yet, and police inquiries are still ongoing.
It's 5:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know your thoughts on that. Should ACC be transportable? Should you be able to take it back to Australia if that is where you normally live and you were injured here in New Zealand and are a Kiwi? 2101 on text, or you can email checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. Homai or whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program. The text again, 2101. Email address is checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. It's time to go to the headlines now. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. A leading child protection agency is urging the government to institute mandatory reporting of child abuse. The head of Safeguarding Children, Willow Duffy, says she endorses Dame Karen Poldassi's call for mandatory reporting in her report into the murder of 5-year-old Malachi Subecz. The manager of a store beside Christchurch's Gun City, which was ram-raided last night, says his security cameras were down when it happened. Police say at about 3:30 this morning a vehicle was used to break into the Cranford Street business. The Court of Appeal has dismissed Ngāti Awa's appeal to stop a company from taking 1 billion litres of water from an aquifer near Whakatane. Creswell, which is a subsidiary of Chinese soft drink giant Nongfu Spring, had applied to expand its water bottling plant at the Otakiri aquifer. The two remaining Christchurch performances of the Royal New Zealand Ballet's Venus Rising have been cancelled because of COVID cases in the company. Ticket holders will be contacted over refunds. For the first time, a film made in New Zealand has made Sight and Sound's top 100 movies list. Jane Campion's 1993 film The Piano was ranked 50th. And a kaupapa Māori approach to housing has secured a major funding boost. $24.7 million will go towards He Ara Hiki Māori, supporting homeless Māori. The program will also connect with whānau who live in inadequate housing. It's 5:22.
Ngā mihi, Belgium and Germany have been knocked out of the Football World Cup as the upsets keep on coming. 12 of the 16 teams for the next round have now been locked in, and there are a few surprises from today's results. We're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. So what was the fallout from today's games, Felicity?
Well, going into this morning, those Group E teams, all of their futures were really up in the air. So that was Spain, Germany, Japan and Costa Rica all had a bit of a chance. They were slightly relying on each other and results to go through. But a come-from-behind win from Japan over Spain has seen Japan and the Spaniards both go through to the round of 16. That comes at the expense of the four-time winners Germany, who are out of the round of 16 for the second consecutive World Cup. One of their national heroes, Thomas Muller, has called it an absolute catastrophe.
Not to overstate the situation, but yeah.
Well, and it wouldn't be the World Cup if there wasn't a bit of controversy. So yeah. Japan's winning goal, that was that go-ahead goal there. That was, the VAR got involved, and this video referee took a while to actually come to a decision about what was happening. Obviously, that goal stood because Japan are going through. But they were having a look, and from a lot of the videos, it shows that the ball actually went across the line before the player crossed it across to the person who scored the goal. So as you can imagine, Germany are quite upset about this, and it's bringing that video referee system into the spotlight again, when actually maybe we should be looking at what the players are doing, not whether technology or the referees are doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting debate, isn't it? Because the technology is supposed to help you. If it's a call that's a tight one, you maybe didn't see it from the right angle. At the same time, should we just suck it up and make the call by what the ref sees or the linesperson sees on the day, in the moment?
Well, we've spoken about that again with Hayden in the triathlon, right? It's about calling those last-minute things and having to sort of suck up the results and go with it. Yeah. And on the other side of that draw, Belgium, as you say, knocked out. So Croatia go through at their expense because they played out a goalless draw this morning. Again, they were waiting on goals and difference to get through. So that's another blow for Belgium. They finished third at the last World Cup and are ranked second in the world.
Yeah, so there's some major upsets. Okay, let's move on to rugby. Super Rugby Pacific is locked in until 2030. So, okay, how has New Zealand Rugby and Rugby Australia settled their differences to get to this point?
Well, as we've probably been hearing over the last few years or even just very recently, there's a lot of tension and friction between those two rugby unions. A lot of it comes down to the split of revenue between those two competitions and what money each union is picking up from that. So they seem to have come to a little bit of an agreement around that. The current broadcasting deals run out in 2025. So they've come up with a behind-the-scenes agreement. They won't say how much that is or what the split is. But Rugby Australia must be feeling a little bit better about themselves and are more happy. And both unions say that they'll renegotiate this once. So that's obviously 5 years beyond that to get to the 2030. So they'll renegotiate that and relook at what's going to happen in terms of the split, and maybe they'll get a bit more of the pie once it comes round to that. But also they've probably got a bit of a mediator in a new 9-person board. There's 5 of those members are actually going to be independent. So, and the remainder will come from the New Zealand Rugby and from Rugby Australia and from their respective player unions. So it's quite a unique example of running a competition, and it's probably going to sort of weed out some of those issues that the two unions have had, or some of that sort of competitive tension that they've had as well, by having the independent board come in and sort of guide this competition through, because the format's not going to change. So some fans will be happy with that, some won't. It is still this 12-team format, still going to have the current playoff system that they have, and they're not saying at this point whether South Africa would rejoin the competition. That's still something they say, well, Mark Robinson says it's still on the table, but it's not something that they'd put in quite yet. So this is locked in for a little while now.
Okay, thank you, Felicity. That's our sports reporter, Felicity Reid there. The Piano Man is about to become the first ever international performer to grace the stage at Eden Park. Billy Joel is in town to play on the hallowed grounds, which have been transformed from a cricket pitch to a concert venue. Our reporter, Tom Taylor, is at Eden Park. Tom, what's going on around the stadium as it gears up for this big event?
Hi Lisa, yes, it's very much in motion. I'm having to hold the earpiece right into my ear now because we've got sound check underway. Hearing a few hits from the band already, heard Moving Out just earlier. Not sure if they're going to bust out the Piano Man anytime soon. But I'm here with the CEO of Eden Park, Nick Sortner. He joins me now. G'day Nick. How have things been over the last week or so gearing up for this big event?
Well, as you can imagine, this is another historic event and moment in Eden Park's 120-year history. Our national stadium, the first ever international artist, and we're just so excited and can't wait to welcome 38,000 fans tomorrow night.
And it's been a bit of a transformation, hasn't it? Because, of course, you had the crickets just last week, 660 the week before that. What are the preparations like? What do you need to change up?
Well, it's been a phenomenal window for us with the Women's Rugby World Cup, throw in the mix 660, obviously the Indian cricket ODI with the Black Caps, and then now Billy Joel. Next week, Guns N' Roses, and as you can imagine, our team, our 3,000 casual staff, and our lean team of 41, they're looking forward to Christmas.
Yeah, and look, it's taken 120 years, you say, for an international act to come to Eden Park. We've got a couple more Guns N' Roses, like you say, Ed Sheeran, start of next year. Are there any more in the works?
We've got plenty of interest, and as you can imagine, artists from around the globe for 2 years, they were disrupted with COVID, and now they want to come. They want to play iconic stadiums, and Eden Park is one of those stadiums, not only for fans but also for performers to be on their bucket list.
Why has it taken this long?
Well, we had the challenges around our resource consent. We're delighted to have 97% support from the residents. Door knocking even in the last 24 hours. There's residents having parties on their veranda, and there's residents coming along. They want to be part of this historic event, the Piano Man, Billy Joel at Eden Park.
You do hear, and it must be, if there's 97% support, it must be a really vocal minority who sometimes kick up a bit of a fuss about the noise here. How have you been handling that?
We want to work with all our residents, and as you can imagine, the cafes, restaurants and bars in the area, the economic benefit that this will deliver, we're talking tens of millions of dollars for Auckland. But after the last 2 years with the challenges with COVID, we want to get people back together and experiencing this coming together as whānau and friends.
Now, I understand there will be some public transportation issues to be worked through, no trains running this weekend, and potentially people coming from far and wide for this. How are those being handled, those logistics?
We've been working with Auckland Transport to deliver a solution that includes rideshare, buses supplementing obviously the existing bus network, and it's disappointing not to have trains, but we've done a huge amount of work in encouraging fans. Gates open from 5 o'clock. Just come and be part of the vibe. As you can see outside, we've got a huge catering and food and beverage offer. We want to make sure that our staff are friendly, using their experience to give that fan experience.
Now, you're giving it a good plug there, but how many tickets have been sold so far?
There's just been a limited number of tickets released. Given it's a first event, first with seats on the field, we wanted to make sure that sight lines were perfect for our fans. So there will be some additional tickets released. So just encouraging people, tickets from $99. He's only doing 2 shows, Melbourne, the MCG, and Eden Park in Australasia. So what great Christmas present. We should have promoted it on Black Friday.
Now, I understand there's going to be some stage configurations, lighting, maybe some rabbit out of the hat moments that you can't give away. Got to be some element of secrecy for the fans who show up. Is there anything you can tell me about what they can expect when they walk through those doors?
What I can say is Billy Joel's set will include all his hits. People are coming here to experience an artist that hasn't been in a stadium in New Zealand for over 25 years. So he wants to... He entertains the fans, and we're just so delighted. And talking with the promoter and the management team, so is the band. They want to get on that hallowed turf and perform for the fans.
Nick Sortner, thank you so much for having us here today.
Hey, Tom, before Nick goes, can you just ask, do you reckon he's got enough portaloos out there, and how many has he got? Because I'm just looking over his shoulder and wow.
Interesting, I actually tallied them up before. By my count, there's about 180 behind us. But Nick, would you have a figure on the number of portaloos here?
That's about right. So that supplements our existing 2,000 across the venue. So that is in addition, obviously, for fans on the field. There's about 14,000 seats on the field.
There you have it.
Thank you.
A lot of portaloos for a lot of people coming through.
Exactly. Thank you, Tom. Tom Taylor there, live from Eden Park. Yep, and they were all, wow, in massive rows behind them there, the portaloos. You'll be well catered for if you're heading to that concert. 28 minutes to 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National, and it is, of course, time for business news. Ko taku hoa I nāianei, ko Nona Peltier, who joins me in the studio. Let's kick off with the hotel industry, right? It's getting back to growth as travellers adapt to the ongoing pandemic. What can you tell us?
Yeah, well, the COVID hotels are definitely a thing of the past. And so a lot of the hotels that had been involved in that were repurposed, refurnished, and so on. But in addition to that, a number of big hotel companies are now expanding here. So, for example, earlier this year, we talked about a company called ProInvest, which opened up the Voco Hotel Holiday Inn Express here in Auckland, and also a Holiday Inn Express in Queenstown. It's looking to double the size of its portfolio, so many more hotels. Accor is a company that manages hotels. It's looking to open, 4 in Australia, 5 in New Zealand within the next year. There's huge demand, apparently. A lot of people are coming to New Zealand and Australia as like a dual sort of voyage, if you will. and also business customers. A lot of conventions, events going on. Christchurch has a convention centre that's apparently a real draw these days. And another company, Quest, which has been around New Zealand for a long time, they do service departments. They're going to be building 10. 3 of them are planning to be opened next year. And look, that's going to add to their portfolio of already 40 hotels. So that's just 3 big companies. I'm not sure that this is a comprehensive list of companies that are building hotels in New Zealand, but it's an awful lot. And there's a lot of optimism about the travel industry generally, business travel for sure, and domestic tourism especially is supposed to hold up well.
That's a lot of hotels, which raises the question of, it's all very well building them and opening them, where are the staff coming from? Because that, you've told us about labour shortages not once. If it's once, it's 100 times.
Did I tell you about a report that was done recently on migration? Did I mention that? No. Well, there's been a report recently on migration, and it's indicating that whereas we have a net outflow of migration at the moment of 8,000 just in September. What we're looking at in the future, and it was Kiwibank that did this report, by the way, their economists are forecasting 36,000 inflow of migrants this time next year. So a big turnaround, 36,000 net increase is a lot of extra people coming to New Zealand, and these are migrants. These are not visitors, okay, not tourists.
Yep, people who are coming to stay
here, yeah, and hopefully that's going to help. It is important though that we still continue to offer that training programs and so on. I mean, I've been talking to some small businesses just recently, and it's like booming. But the big problem is always staff, and it's services sector. We have talked about that quite a lot. Services sector is really going strong. So expect that to continue. We are definitely coming up to our peak holiday season. Tourists are coming back. We hear that flights are full, so let's see what happens.
You will keep us posted, no doubt. The NZX got a new listing today and is set to get another entrant next week. Give us a quick grab.
This is a company that listed today called Black Pearl. It describes itself as a company that supports technology companies. It's only a compliance listing, so at some point in the future, often we see these types of listings when companies are planning to raise money, debt through the market. So that's probably what's in mind for this particular company. Another company, it's a backdoor listing. So it was a company called Snack Media. You might recall it went under, and then it was taken over by another company called Goodwood Capital. That's going to be, if all goes to plan, they'll list on Monday, and on Tuesday they'll get a new name, a new agenda called Waste Co. It'll be a company that basically provides waste, rubbish, and industrial services in the major centres down in South Island. And we'll see what they do. But, they're going to be listed Monday. So, we haven't heard very much going on in the NZX, but suddenly a bit of a flurry.
And what numbers have you got for us, Nona, please?
Okay, let's see. Now, you may have heard in the news earlier that the mayor of Auckland is talking about selling shares
Auckland
in
Airport,
Auckland Airport. Yeah, that saw their share price drop 1.17%. And on a day when really the overall index, it only fell 13 points to 11,655. The Kiwi is holding on to its recent gains against the US dollar at 63.7 US cents, 93.5 Australian, and 52 British pence. What the market is looking for now are the non-farm payroll numbers coming out of the United States overnight. That's going to say how the jobs are going over there. If it's going one way or another, it depends on which way. The U.S. Federal Reserve may be easing up on its interest rate hikes or not.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier with Business News. Remember the Farmer's Santa? Yes, I do. The big red guy who was propped up outside farmers on Auckland's Queen Street for the festive season, encouraging shoppers to come in, with his little finger beckoning you. Well, he lives in Wanaka now, but he's not altogether the Santa you might remember. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown went to find him.
You better watch out.
For 6 decades, the massive 18-metre tall Santa beckoned shoppers to join in silly season spending sprees at downtown Auckland retailers. But after 2019, St Nick hung up the sleigh reins for good. National Transport and Toy Museum curator Jason Rhodes says they offered him a permanent vacation spot.
I just hate seeing a slice of what is, Kiwiana history ending up disappearing, and no one ever knows what happens to them. And so when I heard about them, I touched base with the people in Auckland. They sort of didn't want to see them disappear as well, and being that we're sort of 7 days a week, they thought it was a good position for them.
Mr Rhodes paid $1 for Santa, a bargain when you think he used to cost about $200,000 a year to maintain and store in Auckland. Shunning his usual reindeer, Chris Kringle then took the long journey south using the ubiquitous Kiwi transport mode of truck. And he's undergone a temporary decapitation since he arrived, and currently only his head is on display.
We've got the head, to a point where we're sort of reasonably happy. He'll get done again over the years as we get different sections put together. He's basically got 5 sections to him, and so if we just pick on a section every year or so, we can then put him together in a way that we'd like to see him stay, because there's a lot of work behind the facade that you see.
Originally built in the late 1950s, Father Christmas is feeling the effects of Father Time and is in need of some serious TLC. Jason Rhodes says he'll be restored and eventually go on display in the museum's main building, which is under construction. He says the joy of those who remember the sizeable Santa make the time and cost all worthwhile.
The memories of people coming through the museum even now that are seeing him is just priceless. You can't put a tag on it. And this is why we've done it, is because he's ongoing. He's getting on in years, but look, he'll out-survive all of us.
However, not all are as enthused about the Colossus.
What do you make of Santa?
He's creepy. He looks like something from like a circus where you roll the ball into his mouth. I don't know why its mouth is open.
You don't know why its mouth's open?
They should have made it closed.
Would you want that Santa coming down your chimney and delivering presents?
Probably won't fit.
Probably won't fit. Too big.
Yeah, he eats too many cookies.
But Jason Rhodes says the accusations of Santa being creepy are unfair.
Look, I reckon he's been tarred with the wrong brush there. Is when you speak to people and they see him for the first time, they don't mention that because it hasn't been implanted in their sort of psyche. The kids that I speak to don't tell me that.
Aspersions were cast on St Nick due to a mechanical beckoning finger and winking eye. Mr Rhodes says he would love to restore Santa's previous actions, but decisions about reinstating the mechanical functions will be made as he's rebuilt. He hopes to have the Christmas icon back in one piece within the next 5 or 6 years.
Did someone just fat shame Santa then? Anyway, you can check out the video for that story. We'll put it up on our web page. It is 19 minutes to 6. Let's get to some of your feedback now. A lot of you getting in touch about the Malachi Subecz case and mandatory reporting. Gary says there must be safeguards in place to protect people from false allegations. Mandatory reporting and training is not the silver bullet, another person says. In the current case, the family reported it was OT's failure to act. This from another listener. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there were a number of reports of abuse from Malachi that came through to Oranga Tamariki. More than mandatory reporting is required, this person says. Some years ago, nurses in schools were removed, in the 90s, I think. They attended about once a week and were able to pick up on all kinds of health issues before they became worse. Teachers were able to refer kids to them if they had concerns, and I wonder if children's health has deteriorated since then, says Ruth. Another says, remember a few months back when the nation was spitting tax about OT taking kids into care. I think the point there were whānau members who were willing to help look after this child. And yes, reports were made, but there were other pieces of evidence that were not put forward. For example, photos taken by the childcare centre that showed he had injuries. And this one, before we move on, child abuse and neglect comes to our attention every time there's a death. While this is a tragic fact, it is also sad that children are suffering, but not unto death. Abuse and neglect short of death is tragedy as well, and we all should be aware that it is happening and be brave enough to act for those victims who cannot act for themselves. That from Michael from Levin. Thank you for your feedback. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaro, do keep your thoughts coming about anything you've heard on the programme this evening. The text is 2101 and our email address, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines. Ane Amarama mena pita pita kōrero.
Lava. Thank you, Lisa. The mother of murdered 5-year-old Malachi Subecz says she hopes no other parent in prison will ever face losing a child in this way. The boy was killed a year ago by his caregiver, Michaela Barrable, to whom his mother had entrusted him while she was in prison. 2 infants in Taranaki have contracted meningococcal disease. Taranaki Medical Officer of Health Dr Neil DeWitt says both victims are aged under 5 and have recovered from the virus. An advocacy group for children in care says it should not be left to professionals to deal with child abuse, as everyone needs to take responsibility for speaking out. People in the public gallery of a New Plymouth court had to be separated by police and court staff after a man pleaded guilty to murder. Tūranganui John Ormsby Turner has admitted killing Ray Marshall in August this year. The new Gore mayor says he's likely to opt out from choosing a deputy mayor after his last choice turned down the job. Mayor Bell says the role of deputy will be looked at again at a meeting on December 13th. Major changes to Australia's industrial relations laws have been passed in Parliament. While the majority of unions welcome the legislation, businesses are wary. And the rape charge against the man accused of raping a former political staffer in Australia has been dropped. Bruce Lehrman is accused of raping Brittany Higgins in an office in 2019. It's 5:45.
Kia ora rā e ho. The Immigration Minister is being asked to use his discretion to grant residency to a Hungarian family that's been given just over a month to pack their bags and leave the country. The couple and their 3 children came here from Hungary 6 years ago on an entrepreneur's visa and now operate several businesses, including a kapiti restaurant. In a social media post, the family says after more than half a decade and even more case managers, they've been lost in the labyrinth of immigration and their application for residency has been declined. More than 33,000 people have signed a petition supporting their bid to stay in Aotearoa, and National MP Chris Bishop has written to Minister Michael Wood asking him to intervene. Owner and principal consultant of immigration company Into NZ, Katie Armstrong, joins us now. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Lisa. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. So does this sound familiar to you, this person's case involving 7 immigration case managers, more than half a decade, only just getting an answer and it's no? Should it be this complicated?
So what's actually happened with the entrepreneur category is some years back we had a very sort of pendulum swing change of policy, and it just, I mean, in simple terms, it just made it almost impossible to get through, to the point where really those of us in the industry pretty much treat the entrepreneur as a really last resort type visa, which is a real pity because we always previously thought, you know, the entrepreneur category was really great for families like this to come in and set up community-based, you know, businesses. But unfortunately, the policy just became so difficult to manoeuvre and the decline rates just shot through the roof. So when I read about this story, I just thought, oh, you know, here we go again. I mean, it's just, it's not really a surprise to those of us that work in this.
So is this family's experience, is it common to others?
Yes, there's been quite a number of people that have really struggled to get through. And it's because they, you know, the criteria are just so strict. They're way stricter and actually very wing-clipping for business people because, I mean, for example, you know, you're supposed to nominate before you even start the business. You've got to pin down how many jobs you're going to create, how much money you're going to invest, how much, you know, what's your turnover going to be. Very difficult to project turnover. And then if you don't meet your exact forecast, then you get turned down. And that's what makes it so fickle.
Obviously, the country needs safeguards, but I go back to my original question. Does it need to be this complicated?
No, I think that we would love to see an entrepreneur category that gets the balance right again. The category has been widely recognised by those that use it to be almost a dead duck. You know, it's just really not a goer. And I really feel for this family. You know, actually coming in, setting up a business, running a business, becoming absolutely entrenched in your work and your community, only to then sort of fail at that last hurdle. It is very, very gutting, and it's so risky, you know. But the statistics tell a story, Lisa. I mean, the entrepreneur category is literally sort of dying a bit of a death.
So what does this say about who we want as Kiwis?
Well, I mean, this is something that I could talk at length about, because it's actually what's going through all of our different settings. We seem to have this real disconnect between what we say we want and what we really want, and then what we can actually realistically get. And, you know, I look at a family that's working really hard to meet the requirements, and they're obviously in hospitality, which is been very difficult through COVID after all. I mean, what hospitality organisation could really say they could meet targets during COVID? And I suspect, I don't know the full facts of this case, but I'm sure COVID would have played its part. And yeah, I mean, we're sort of in some kind of unrealistic paradigm where we've got this very weird set of policies that require things that just aren't realistic in the New Zealand setting.
So when you get a no and they tell you you've got 42 days to go, how often and how realistic is it to think you can turn that around?
Well, what happens is to be actually told that you've got 42 days to go, you have to have been you actually have to be at the end of your temporary visas. And again, I don't act for this family, so I don't know the full ins and outs. But let's assume that they're running out of temporary visas and they also have been declined residence. Then you literally are at the end of a rope, and you've got to either, you know, go to appeal and claim humanitarian circumstances, which is incredibly difficult and very stressful, or you have to get ministerial reprieve. But, you know, it may be that if this family makes an appeal to our tribunal against the decline of residence, they can buy some time. But, you know, for families with children, it's clearly intensely stressful to be in such a state of uncertainty. Yeah.
In your experience then with what you do, I mean, are we sending a message? Are we open or not?
I think the entrepreneur category for a long time has sent a message that we don't want most entrepreneurs. I mean, that's been going on for a number of years now. I think all of our other settings are now sending stronger and stronger messages that we're not really going to welcome your average person. You know, the future for tradespeople is very bleak. In terms of being able to get residence, we've just got this change of policy coming upon us where partners of workers coming in are going to have real problems getting working rights. So overall, you know, when you start to add up all the different moving parts, and everything is so difficult for your average family. Yeah, not the sort of message I think we should be sending out.
Thank you so much for your time this evening. That's Katie Armstrong, who's from Into NZ, an immigration company, and she's the principal consultant and owner. It is 8 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Wellington's Tip Shop is marking 2.5 decades of turning trash into treasure. Opened in 1997 by locals, it's grown from 2 staff to 20. Our reporter Kate Green and cameraman Angus Drever paid them a visit.
Even on a quiet day, Wellington's Tip Shop is overflowing. Recycle Centre manager Shalali Shetty says between fast fashion and society's desire for cheap disposable goods, they're certainly not short on items.
Some customers have honestly told us it's just panic buying, just in case, we go into another lockdown and we don't have things. But I guess it just gives them a sense of reassurance that, they have it in their garage.
Ms. Shetty says the most commonly donated items are crockery, utensils, pots and pans, and books.
Some days it's overwhelming because people do have like nearly cartons and cartons of books and we literally have no space, so we just have to recommend them to come back to us.
Until 2 years ago, they would cut the plugs off electrical items and sell them for parts. Now they have a testing and tagging project, and items which pass the safety test are flying out the door. About 500 cars pass through this car park on a busy weekend, whether it's to drop things off at the recycling station or to visit the tip shop. The council is looking for ways to make this more accessible for people without cars, for example, smaller hubs based around the city. The council's waste minimisation manager, Jenny Elliott, says they're now diverting around 1,000 tonnes of waste from the landfill each year.
On an annual basis, we're diverting about 500 tonnes, 500 to 600 tonnes of recyclables, and then easily the same again of the material that's coming through the shop for reuse and resale.
Over its quarter of a century, the shop has sold countless weird and wonderful items. Shilali Shetty remembers one in particular.
There was a cane coffin that was donated to us and we sold it for I think around $280. And the hilarious thing is we as staff would always keep an eye if someone wants to get into it and give it a go. But hey, we didn't get around to doing that, but it was sold in the end.
Another rare find was a portrait of Helen Clark, painted on a plywood sheet recovered from the landfill. It sold for $2,500 to an Auckland man and his family, big fans of the Prime Minister, the money going to Women's Refuge. A pair of 18th century Martin's Margins spectacles unexpectedly sold on Trade Me for $8,000 to a man who'd recently lost his partner to cancer. The glasses reminded him of her. The shop attracts all sorts of customers, from students kitting out their flats to people that visit multiple times a day.
Yeah, we've got our regulars that will be here, queuing, waiting to get in before we open in the morning. We've got lots of families that come up, just people from all walks of life, really.
Recent collaborations with the Sustainability Trust, Hopper Refill, Makers Space and Non-Stop Solutions have created crockery kits for community centres, students and refugees.
Do check out the video version of that story online. There looks to be a lot of bargains. Will prayer help the praying mantis? Are bees buzzy drumming up enough support? Who do these beetles think they'll beat? Or have sandflies bitten off more than they can chew? The Bug of the Year campaign has begun and it coincides with Otago Museum's pollination workshop. Tess Brunton got amongst some of the creepy crawlies.
All of the little critters that are creepy crawling around your garden, they're doing something. They're not there to scare you. They're there to live their best life too, and to aerate the soil or decompose the chicken poop or to eat up the leaves that fell to the ground.
That's Dr. Jenny Yant, who sits on the Bug of the Year organising committee. She's eager to encourage more people to get bug-eyed about insects at the pollinator workshop on Saturday, which she helped to coordinate. The day will include building wildflower seed bombs, learning how to build a bug motel, starting a herb garden, and getting up close and personal with a variety of insects. Science educator Samuel Purdy is hoping to bring along a black tunnel web spider, prickly stick insects, and a few other critters for show and tell.
What I often like to do is I try and find the biggest, scariest, beefiest spider I can find, and I'll get people to hold it or at least look at it up close, and that often helps people that are quite scared because people fear what they don't understand.
He found a few stick insects and a sheepweb spider while out looking on Wednesday night. The male spiders often have weapons they use to fight each other.
See how massive those chillis are out there, basically. Scraping on my skin.
He says it helps to persevere and have a bit of luck on your side when searching for bugs, and gently turning over logs and stones is a good option. One of his top contenders is the antlion lacewing. The larvae are crafty predators that create a pit for their prey.
And they sit at the bottom with their jaws wide open, waiting for little insects to fall down, and just like a sandworm from the movie books Dune, it'll just jump through and pull these critters into the ground. I've seen pictures of little bees in the bottom of these pits, and then the sand line will move the sand and this bee will just disappear below the surface.
Pollinator Workshop co-coordinator Connell McLean says the insect's creepy, even weevil reputation is somewhat deserved.
They've got 6 legs, they've got lots of eyes and wings, there's just a lot going on that isn't very human. So I think a lot of people, once they get over that initial, what is this creature, they can really start to appreciate how cool they are.
He'll have a few bumblebees that people can feed sugar water using toothpicks, and was catching and releasing them at the public garden today. The museum's natural science collection manager, Onli Lau, was bugged by insects when she was a kid.
I have to confess I actually grew up quite afraid of insects because I didn't want to be bitten by them. But after studying biology and just understanding what role they play in our ecosystems, I just kind of grew an appreciation of them.
Now she hopes to share that appreciation, but recognises it can be an uphill battle.
If you don't actually enjoy bugs, that you can do a hate vote. And so you can hate vote for the sandfly. And it's just, it's all in good fun. It's all a part of increasing awareness in general. Bugs can be very polarizing. You love them or you hate them. And so this is a good way to kind of capture that hate vote.
Dr. Yant has a tip for those keen to protect pollinators.
One of the best and easiest things you can do, leave those little dandelions and those little flowering flowers that are popping up through your lawn, leave them be. That's one of the best food sources for pollinators, especially this time of year when you're waiting for things to bloom.
The free pollinator workshop is open to all at the Te Hura Otago Museum between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. on Saturday. Voting for the Bug of the Year closes in February, and the country's favourite creepy crawly will be crowned on Valentine's Day.
I'm totally going to vote in that competition. I feel that they all should have campaign managers because I think that there are some underbugs there. I mean, is anyone voting for the mosquito? What about the cockroach? It's an unsung hero. It's really resilient. If I'm honest, my favourite one's probably the praying mantis. We'd be interested in your thoughts on that. We're wondering if we should set up in competition to Morning Report. Instead of the bird of the year, we will go with bug of the year. 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Someone in Arch Hill has got in touch to say the sound check's going really well for Billy Joel at Mount Eden.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Marama Tipole. The mother of murdered 5-year-old Malachi Subecz says she hopes no other parent in prison will ever face losing a child in the way she has. Her only child was killed a year ago by Michaela Barrable, who was appointed Malachi's guardian while she was in jail. Ruth Hill reports.
In a statement released today by the Department of Corrections on her behalf, the mother says there are no words to describe her emotions in the last year. She says she lives with her mistakes every single day and bitterly regrets trusting a non-family member with her son. The mother says her only hope is that no other parent in prison goes through a tragedy like this. She says she wants to thank those who have helped her through the toughest time of her life.
Women's groups are calling on the organisers of the Rhythm and Vines Music Festival to drop a UK rapper over a domestic violence conviction. Dizzy Rascal received a 12-month restraining order and a curfew this year for assaulting his ex-partner. Women's Refuge Chief Executive Ange Jury says keeping the artist in the lineup at the Gisborne Festival sends a poor message. She says people need to take domestic violence more seriously in order to make a difference in the way the country is tracking. Ange Jury says advocacy groups will try to speak to the Immigration Minister about the rapper's entry into the country. The manager of a store beside Christchurch's Gun City, which was ram-raided last night, says his security cameras were down when it happened. Police say at about 3:30 this morning, a vehicle was used to break into the Cranford Street business. E-Mega's manager, Jeremy Joseph, says it's bizarre that the cameras in front of the store were down at the time of the ram raid. He's worried for his staff.
I think concern for everybody in business and just the citizens in general. I mean, we worry about our staff coming into the store now and, what could happen if they now come to the store with the guns.
Police are searching for 4 ram raiders who left in a black Subaru Forester. China is reportedly set to ease COVID quarantine restrictions and reduce mass testing. There's been a wave of protests in China over the government's zero COVID policy. Our correspondent Patrick Fonk reports.
Reports say the measures due to be unveiled will include limits on mass testing as well as regular nucleic acid testing. Some positive cases and close contacts will also be able to isolate at home under certain conditions. It's a significant shift in policy following the huge backlash over some of the toughest curbs in the world. The easing of measures come despite cases nationwide still standing near record highs, but the disruptions that have gone on for 3 years have prompted the biggest show of civil disobedience in China in decades.
A negotiator for Eastern Bay of Plenty, iwi, Whakatohea, says he's confident it has the numbers to finalise its treaty settlement with the Crown. 67% of Whakatohea have voted to accept a $100 million settlement offer, which has been one of the longest running and most contentious. The results will be taken to the government to decide whether it's enough of a mandate to settle. The chair of the Whakatohea Pre-Settlement Claims Trust, Graham Reisera, is confident it is.
It would be good to have the apology and the signing of the deed of settlement on the reservation that all Whakatohea were put onto after confiscation of our land. And it's something that I think many of our iwi look forward to, is the Crown apology.
Graham Reisera says he expects to hear from the government by the end of the year. The Bulla District Council has received more than $13 million in funding to repair flood-damaged roads on the west coast. $1.5 million of the Waka Kotahi money went to the council immediately after the February floods for emergency repairs. The rest will be spent on fixing the remainder of the road network, like the Karamea Bluff and Denniston roads, which were badly damaged. The work is expected to take up to 2 years to complete. A former Sydney school teacher, Chris Dawson, has been jailed for 24 years for murdering his first wife, Lynette, in 1982. Her body has never been found, and the Crown argued he killed her in order to have a relationship with a teenager he later married. The ABC's Jamie McCann reports.
74-year-old Chris Dawson has been in custody since he was found guilty in August following a judge-alone trial in the New South Wales Supreme Court. Justice Ian Harrison was satisfied he had a possessive infatuation with the family's teenage babysitter, which motivated him to kill his wife Lynette in 1982. In sentencing, he said Ms Dawson was faultless and undeserving of her fate, and the fact her body has never been recovered was an aggravating circumstance of the objectively very serious crime. He sentenced Dawson to a maximum 24 years in prison with a non-parole period of 18 years. Dawson will be eligible for parole in August 2040.
The case against a former political advisor accused of raping a colleague inside Australia's Parliament House has been dropped. 27-year-old Bruce Lemon denies sexually assaulting Brittany Higgins on a minister's sofa after a night out in 2019. Mr Lemon's trial collapsed in October because of jury misconduct. Prosecutors say the ongoing risk to Ms Higgins' mental health means a retrial is not in the public interest. Friend Emma Webster says Ms Higgins is currently in hospital to help deal with the trauma of the incident and its aftermath. Some Auckland drivers are being told to book an urgent warrant of fitness inspection after an auto shop was caught being too lenient. Mr Q's Auto in Henderson has had 2,500 warrants revoked after an inspection uncovered bad practices. Waka Kotahi noted improper processes and significant inspection errors. All of the current warrants issued by the shop for 2,674 vehicles have been made invalid. Waka Kotahi is notifying customers. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we've got our gumboots on for Country Life with Duncan and Sally. And while we're there, a look back at the history of the dating service for the rural community, Country Contacts. Dan Slevin with What to Watch on the Weekend and Shortcut. And music to shake a stick at with Finn Johansson and Friday Night Live. Join us on Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
RNZ National, Lisa Owen and Checkpoint back in a minute. But right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northland and Auckland, long fine spells with isolated showers. For Coromandel Peninsula and the Bay of Plenty, mainly fine with isolated showers for tomorrow. Waikato to Kapiti Coast, including the Central High Country. Fine spells, a few showers developing this evening, becoming fine tomorrow. For Gisborne to Wairarapa and Wellington, a few showers spreading north, then clearing to cloudy periods in the south tonight and elsewhere tomorrow. Nelson and Marlborough showers developing with cloudy periods tomorrow, showers becoming confined to the ranges. Bulla to Fiordland fine, but some showers in Bulla and Fiordland mainly tomorrow. For Canterbury, scattered showers retreating to Banks Peninsula tomorrow morning and fine spells increasing. Otago and Southland showers mainly in Southland and coastal Otago today, becoming confined to the southern coast tomorrow, and a few showers for the Chatham Islands. It's 7 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā marama, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Situation vacant again. The man chosen as Auckland Transport's new CEO has pulled the handbrake on before even getting into the driver's seat. In a surprise media statement, AT said with the arrival of a new Auckland Council and changes to the board, the environment has changed and the preferred person doesn't want the job anymore. Checkpoint understands he was a high calibre candidate based in the UK and wanted to have a conversation with the Mayor before he moved to Auckland, but never got one. Mayor Wayne Brown has been highly critical of the Transport Agency's performance and called for the entire board to resign. So far, only a few have obliged him. Joining us now is Matt Lowry from Greater Auckland. Kia ora, Matt. How much of a setback is this, do you think?
Kia ora, Lisa. I think it's a huge setback. The previous CEO resigned almost a year ago, now, or roughly exactly a year ago, and as Aucklanders, we need some certainty over to what's happening with our transport future, and this just sets it back even further because, as whatever they may be, that the interim people who are looking after the role are not going to make any big decisions. They're not going to challenge anything to make sure we get good outcomes for transport in Auckland.
Yeah, so what are your worst fears here? What do you think is going to stall? What won't go ahead?
Well, there's a number of projects that are ready to go. That they're shovel ready, as you might say. Things like some inner west, some improvements to streets in the inner west, which include not just adding cycleways, but also rebuilding the road to make it better for car drivers, for pedestrians, for bus users, and they're already supposedly on hold as a result of the change in council and uncertainty over what's happening with that. And what we really need is a strong leader in Auckland Transport who's going to help encourage and get these projects over the line.
What do you mean? Someone who can stand up to the Mayor?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Mayor is one part of the council, and the council has an entire strategy around transport that hasn't changed as of yet. And so we need to get these projects delivered. They're ready to go. The funding is there from the government to deliver them, and we need to get on with that rather than constant consultation. Some of these projects have been in the works since 2016, and we're still waiting for them to be delivered because Auckland Transport keep trying to go back and redo them all over again.
So the statement from AT, it was almost like we needed a translator to work out what was going on behind the scenes. What do you think happened here?
Well, I think we have that the board had picked someone who was willing to make a change, who was cared about climate change and about making the city better. That's all the indications that had been coming up prior to that, and that this person isn't sure that they're going to get that mandate from a new council and from a new mayor. So why would they put themselves in that position of coming in and not being able to achieve anything? And I think that's a really sad state of that Auckland is in, that we are in a position where people just don't want to be working here, possibly.
So this was an international candidate. Why do we need someone from the outside, people will ask?
I think that there are probably some good candidates locally as well, and I know that it was an international search, but what we've seen in transport in particular is that often people in New Zealand don't necessarily have the skills for some of these big transport transformational roles that we had. The previous CEO was in New Zealand, but he came back from overseas, and it's really important that we have this international experience. There's a lot of good things happening overseas with transport that would be useful to employ in Auckland. And deliver. So things like how we deal with changes in streets, and how we deal with public transport, and how we deal with making the streets easy to get around. Those are the sorts of things that someone with international experience could really have benefit in helping push through and get that delivered.
So it's been a lengthy process as it is, potentially months away from getting someone else. What is the way forward for an agency that is, in essence, getting it in the air from the Mayor, and they're leaderless in the sense they don't have the CEO that's going to stay in that job right now? Yeah,
I think that one of the problems that Auckland Transport has had is the Mayor hasn't always been entirely wrong about saying that Auckland Transport is broken. One of the problems that the agency has been facing is that they continually are trying to appease everyone rather than trying to deliver what the right thing is in terms of what the best evidence says is to do. And so I think what the council and what the agency need to do is look at what does the evidence say we need to deliver, and look to how we deliver that, as opposed to trying to always appease everyone and keep everyone happy, because what ends up happening is by trying to appease everyone, they're making no one happy, and they're getting a reputation that they've developed of being poor at delivery and poor outcomes.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That is Matt Lowry from Greater Auckland. Artistic Swimming New Zealand wants to bust stigmas around the sport, formerly known as synchronised swimming, and get more boys and men to give it a go. The International Swimming Federation has started opening up the sport to men, and there's speculation that the IOC might let them compete in the Paris 2024 Olympics. Bridget Tunnicliffe reports.
What a performance. Well, whatever the determination of the results, whether it's gold, whether it's silver, they have left nothing in the pool. They gave it everything.
Artistic swimming has come a long way from the choreographed scenes in Hollywood movies, popular from the 1930s to 50s, to what it is today, a serious Olympic sport. In 2015, the international swimming body FINA first loosened its rules and men were able to compete at the World Champs in mixed duets. And just recently it voted to allow team routines at FINA events to include up to 2 men. Chair of Artistic Swimming New Zealand, Shirley Hooper, says boys have been competing in New Zealand for a long time, but it's difficult to build numbers.
It's quite tough to be a minority in a sport, and in New Zealand at every single event we always have 1 or 2 boys involved, but it's quite hard to forge the way unless you have a block of boys involved. So that's a big push for us in the coming year, is to get more young men or elite men involved in the sport.
Hooper says while it requires grace, top competitors have to be strong too. She believes men add a whole new dynamic. Think Torvill and Dean, the most famous figure skating duet to grace the ice.
What the men do is allow storytelling in a different way in mixed duets. So you'll often see them swimming to romantic music or to different forms of music. So it allows them to tell a story through their routine. The strength when you're in the water, sometimes the lifts, if you've got a really good, strong guy under the water, then yes, he can propel his female partner.
Kirsten Anderson competed in synchronised swimming for New Zealand at the Delhi 2010 Commonwealth Games with her sister Caitlin. Anderson has seen elite male artistic swimmers at international competitions throughout her career.
They bring a completely different aspect to the sport, like just kind of like figure skating. Like I just think it will take the sport in a whole new angle. I think this new artistic side of it that you couldn't do with a female pair, that will be really cool to see that coming out more. There's more creativity that come by including the males.
Anderson, who has done a lot of coaching, says there are skills from other sports that transfer nicely.
Any background in like gymnastics, swimming or diving, dance is definitely, or acrobatics is always going to be helpful for males and females.
Ayrton Sweeney represented South Africa for 10 years in swimming before retiring last year. Earlier this year, he got into artistic swimming by chance and says he had his own misconceptions about the sport.
But I found out that it was very difficult, especially when it got to the actual positions that you had to hold in the water. So, it was a lot of different muscles that I wasn't used to using, and also having to synchronize with someone else. That's quite tricky.
Sweeney got hooked and decided to try to qualify with his swim partner for June's World Champs, and after 4 months of intense training, they were on their way. He met some top male competitors who have spent years in the sport and says they should be allowed to go to the Olympics.
I think it has to happen. They're incredible sportsmen. It's just a shame to not see them included in the Olympics and not, be able to kind of get the cherry on top for their athletic careers.
If the IOC does let men compete at the Olympics, it's likely to be in the group routine.
It's 16 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. New jobs data in the United States shows there's very low unemployment in the world's largest economy. But economists are puzzled as a lot of Americans have dropped out of the workforce through the COVID pandemic. It's believed long COVID is adding to America's labour shortage. And one study says long COVID could cost the US more than $3 trillion. The BBC's Michelle Fleury has more.
So it's this constant depletion, this constant exhaustion, and this constant feeling that you're just not yourself.
New Yorker Melissa Mansfield got COVID in March 2022. 8 months later, she's still struggling with the virus.
There's so much fear, like I didn't know, is this my life forever? I just had to stop everything that I love in my life.
Melissa worked part-time in marketing to fund her passion projects, dance and filmmaking. She wants to work again, but can't.
There's definitely been times where I've been too sick, like I just know that I can't work, because it's not just physical exertion, it's mental exertion, it's emotional exertion.
Melissa is one of up to 4 million Americans out of work due to long COVID. To put a dollar figure on that, the annual cost of lost wages is estimated to be as high as $230 billion. Americans with long COVID have had to cut back hours, switch to remote work or drop out altogether, contributing to America's labour shortage. All across the country, businesses are struggling to find workers, a problem that's particularly acute here in New York. At one point, the epicentre of America's COVID-19 outbreak, the state's economy still hasn't fully healed. The share of workers participating in the workforce lags the rest of the nation, something that should concern us all, according to the New York State Deputy Controller Maria Doulis.
It's important for vibrant communities to have a high rate of labor force participation, and that helps, fill jobs, provide services, keep communities and economies very vibrant. And so keeping an eye on the labor force participation rate and the size of the labor force is really important for the long-term economic and fiscal prosperity of New York and the nation.
According to one study, long COVID could cost the United States $3.7 trillion in lost earnings, reduced quality of life and medical expenses, leaving COVID-19 long haulers like Melissa with a hefty doctor's bill.
I think in general it's hard to find specialists on long COVID in the States. And then once you try to find them through your health insurance, it's a mess.
While America is enjoying a period of very low unemployment, it masks the harm long COVID has done to the workforce. The economic damage may be felt for years to come.
In the US, 4 lion cubs have finally found a place to call home. The orphaned cubs were relocated from Kiev to a sanctuary in Minnesota to escape the war in the Ukraine. The move took months of planning, but now the animals are settling into their new life at the Wildcat Sanctuary. Adam Duxter has the story.
On the left, we have Taras. In the middle, we have Lacia. And then we have Stefania here on the right. And big girl Prada is trying to become a member of the family.
A process Tammy Thies says
she's being very tolerant and gentle.
She can't believe is finally happening.
They're a symbol. They're a symbol of what can be done when we all work together.
3 of these 4 are siblings. Traitors in Ukraine surrendered them to be orphans in September.
There were daily drone attacks in Odessa, and then there were bombing attacks very close to them while they were in Kyiv.
Which is when the International Fund of Animal Welfare got involved.
For this rescue, there were so many different pieces and different players that all had to be in place and perfectly aligned to have a success.
Including getting the lions on a plane before temperatures got too cold, meaning a 3-month process really had to happen in 2.
And we did have moments, more than I would like to admit, where we thought this was never going to work.
We didn't know until we stepped foot on that plane that we were actually going to be able to bring them to the U.S. And so I think once we had them loaded and in the plane, we were able finally to breathe like they're going to be finally coming home.
But Tuesday, home at last. Right now, each of these cubs is just a few months old. They only weigh about 30 or 40 pounds or so, but they will grow to be 450 pounds each and spend the next 20 years of their lives living here on the sanctuary.
And to know that they will never have to move again and they'll get to live their lives out here at the sanctuary is the best feeling ever.
Those cubs are just gorgeous. More now on the racism scandal engulfing Buckingham Palace and the top royal who's been forced to apologise and resign from her roles. Lady Susan Hussey repeatedly asked a black charity boss where she was really from, despite being told the woman was British. The conversation was likened to a racist interrogation. The BBC's Sarah Campbell has more.
Ngozi Fulani, standing next to the Queen Consort with her back to the camera, was at Buckingham Palace in her role as a prominent campaigner helping women and families affected by domestic abuse. Minutes after arriving, she was approached by a palace aide, Lady Susan Hussey.
When the lady first approached me, one of the first things she did was to take my locks and move it out of the way. No conversation at first, and then she says, I just want to see your name back.
Ms Fulani, a British national, then says she was repeatedly and aggressively questioned.
I'm from here, I was born here. Yeah, but where are you really from? I'm really from here. Yeah, but okay, so I can see that this is going to be a bit of a challenge. She said, what's your nationality? And I said, lady, I was born here, I'm British. I was thinking that would be the end of it. No.
Lady Susan Hussey, here in the blue, who was a lady-in-waiting to Queen Elizabeth for 6 decades, stepped aside from her honorary role yesterday. A palace statement said the individual concerned expressed her profound apologies for what happened. Are you clear in your mind that what happened was a racist incident?
I'm very clear, right? No matter how uncomfortable it is for other people to accept, I'm very clear that I experienced racism in an environment that I should have felt safe in, and we need to address that.
The row overshadowed the arrival in the United States of the Prince and Princess of Wales. The focus was supposed to be on environmental issues, but instead, before they landed, their spokesperson was compelled to make the royal couple's position clear that racism has no place in our society. Buckingham Palace said in a statement it had reached out to Ngozi Fulani. Today, she says she's still waiting for direct contact to be made.
Nobody's reached out to us directly from the palace. We would look forward to a conversation because this can't be, I'm sorry, and move on.
Staying with the royals, the trailer for a tell-all documentary by Prince Harry and Meghan has been released, offering a first glimpse at what the royal couple say in the inside story of why they stepped down from the royal duties. The potential bombshells came as Prince William and Kate visit the US, as the ABC's Barbara Miller reports.
On the surface, the royal visit to Boston is going well.
Oh my God, I'm just blown away. They were so lovely.
Adoring fans line the streets, including little Henry, who dressed up as a King's Guard and got to meet the Prince and Princess of Wales.
I asked them where Prince George was, and they answered and said that he was in school. I'm going to scream to my BFF Baxter and tell them I'm famous.
The heir to the throne and his wife are in Boston for 3 days to present the awards in their Earthshot Prize for contributions to environmentalism. But the other royal couple over in California are making headlines too. A trailer for their highly anticipated Netflix documentary has just dropped.
When the stakes are this high, doesn't it make more sense to hear our story from us?
Netflix says Harry and Meghan is an unprecedented 6-part documentary series that explores the span of the couple's relationship. But it's the parts that focus on the relationship between Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex and the rest of the royals that are creating the most waves.
I had to do everything I could to protect my family.
The 59-second clip includes images of Meghan crying while bent over making a phone call and weeping again while sitting on a sofa with an exasperated Harry throwing back his head.
No one sees what's happening behind closed doors.
In Boston, while Prince William and Catherine politely chatted with workers at a climate innovation hub, there was no mention of the trailer, nor of the racism row that overshadowed their arrival in the States.
Now, for all you food lovers, yesterday the French baguette was added to a UN cultural heritage list, and today it's Tunisian spicy harissa paste. The UN's cultural body, UNESCO, has described it as a condiment, an ingredient, and even a dish in its own right. The BBC's Rachel Wright has been finding out more.
I've come to the buzzing heart of London's West End to a North African restaurant called Souk. There are people sitting outside with big shisha pipes, smoking apple tobacco, I guess. They told me on the phone that they use harissa paste here and that the executive chef will tell me all about it. So let's go inside to see if we can find him. Oh, I can smell wood-burning smoke. How amazing. Hello, you must be Samir.
Yes.
It's a beautiful place.
Thank
it looks
you.
Just like, what, Morocco?
North African,
North
actually.
Africa.
It covers Morocco, Algeria and Tunisia.
You use harissa paste?
Oh, yes. Well, I grew up with harissa and I had it for lunchtime today and yesterday, matter of fact.
Oh, let me just sit down. So today, harissa paste has been added by the UN cultural body, which is called UNESCO, to its list of intangible cultural heritage.
Well, I'm not surprised, frankly. It's all over North Africa as well, whether it's inside the cooking or on the side, but it's got to be on the table.
Oh, so harissa is always on the table in North Africa?
Salt, bread and harissa are compulsory. They have to be on the table.
What goes into harissa paste?
The ingredients are chili, garlic, cinnamon, carvi, coriander powder, 14 in total, you know. Once you put it on, the dish has more depth, more taste. It's part of our normal life, really. But if it's missing, then it's the problem. If you have it every day, you might not even notice it. But once it's missing on the table, it's a big problem. Service!
Aha!
Olive oil.
Olive oil.
Harissa. Nice piece of bread.
It's good.
Fantastic.
You have to give me a bit now.
No, of course.
I'm salivating. Okay. Oh.
Huh?
Oh, that is hot.
It is nice, yeah. It is hot.
Oh, it's hot, but it's nice.
Each time I eat it is like the first time. It's not fattening at all, so brilliant. But in the evening, try to reduce the amount, you know, because it's chili sauce. Okay, that's my advice.
And it might keep you awake.
Absolutely.
Sami and Mahdi?
Mahdi, yes, Souk
from
restaurant.
The Souk restaurant. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's making me terribly hungry. On the Bug of the Year, a lot of you engaged in this, and Blanche from Kapiti says, Bug of the Year, no contest, wetter. Super cute or super creepy, potentially. Stick insect, someone else says. Cicadas rule, reckons Peter in Auckland. David, well, he just says, oh, bugger. On the subject of the Farmer's Santa, someone's really pleased it's been saved, but wonders what happened to the Keen's Jeans Queen Street Neon Cowboy. That's William. Never heard of it, William. It sounds like a checkpoint investigation in the making. We'll see if we can find out for you. The Lake News team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. Have a fantastic weekend if you've got time off. We'll be back with you next Monday, same place, same time.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Women's groups are calling on the organisers of the Rhythm and Vines Music Festival to drop a UK rapper over a domestic violence conviction. China is reportedly set to ease COVID quarantine restrictions and reduce mass testing. The Bulla District Council has received more than $13 million in funding to repair flood-damaged roads on the West Coast, and the case against a former political advisor accused of raping a colleague in Australia has been dropped. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
At the start of the year on Country Life, we met a rural student who'd moved to the city to study tourism.
I didn't think I'd get to the end of the year. I thought I was going to drop out. It was my homesickness that was just getting to me.
Now it's December and Rain can't wait for 2023.
I've never ever lived in New Zealand and I had to buy my passport just for this.
Is it a good photo?
Yeah, it's a beautiful photo.
Country Life, Friday night just after the 7 o'clock news and Saturday morning after 7 on RNZ National.
RNZ National, you're listening to Trending Now. It's 29 minutes to 7 and we begin with Focus on Politics.
Yes, so I will be running as an independent, and as I've said, my intention is to start a new centrist party.
It's been a long 6 weeks since Dr Gaurav Sharma resigned from his parliamentary post. His spectacular exit starting with serious bullying allegations against the Labour Party and ending with the launch of his own political party.
But, I just feel relieved. I've just got to move on to the next step.
The by-election for Dr Sharma's former electorate is now well underway. So what is the lay of the western side of the Waikato River? Who has the upper hand in the Spellweather electorate? And do voters care enough to have their say come the 10th of December? Kia ora, ko Annika Smith aho. Nei te pūrongo tō ranga